Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of a Rowing Chat. I'm Rebecca Caro, and today I'm joined by Phil White, who is the author of a book on watermanship and injury prevention. But first, a brief word from our sponsors. As you know, we cannot keep this going without your support of the sponsors who are kind enough to help us. So first up, Blake Gourlay, who's one of the presenters on the Rowing Chat Network, has written a book which is about the movement of rowing, and it explains how movement limitations in your foot and your ankle can affect a rower's performance and technique and obviously health. He's got a special offer for any listeners of Rowing Chat on the ebook, which you can get by going to our sponsors page, rowing.chat/sponsors. And there's a discount coupon there for you to get the book. Secondly, we're doing an audience survey. Don't forget, please fill it out. We really are grateful for everyone who's done it already, but it does help us to understand you, what you think about things we do well and things we do not so well. So this is your opportunity to shout back and join the common voice. Thirdly, William Marnie is a shirt maker for athletes. They make dress shirts for men, but ones that are designed for the athletic body rather than the average human being. Their range is brilliant. It's very diverse, but importantly, the cut and styling is designed from the very beginning to fit people who are athletes. William Marnie also has a special discount coupon, Rowing Chat 10, for a 10% off. You can also pick that up from our sponsors page. And the links to all of these sponsors are in the show notes. You will be doing us a huge favor by following and clicking on at least one of them. And lastly, we've been selected by the FeedSpot panelists as one of the top 10 rowing podcasts on the web, which we're very flattered by. And you can see the complete list at blog.feedspot.com/rowing_podcasts. So thanks very much to the FeedSpot guys for that. Now, welcome to my guest. Nice to meet you, Phil. Tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and your background.
Oh, goodness. Okay, so here we go. So for the past 15 years or so, I have been co-authoring books in human performance, which is a ritzy name for health and wellness, really, with the likes of Andy Galpin and Brian McKenzie, who I wrote the book Unplugged with. Fergus Connolly, who until recently was director of performance for the Michigan Wolverine football team. And so we wrote Game Changer and then 59 Lessons together. And also Frank Merritt, who by day is an emergency room physician director down in Florida. And by night, we wrote a book called The 17-Hour Fast, which is kind of a minimum effective dose intermittent fasting protocol, which you only need to do once a week to get some of those benefits. And then also I write for companies like Onnit, Momentous, Hana, and I've also written for McGregor Fast, which is Conor McGregor's endurance-focused company, Laird Hamilton's XPT, which hence why Laird kindly agreed to do the foreword for our book Waterman 2.0, and many others in human performance, as well as the magazines that some listeners / viewers might know, Canoe and Kayak, and before Men's Journal absorbed it, Sup the Mag.
That is a very diverse and long history. So tell us about how you met Kelly, because today we want to talk about his watermanship story.
Sure. So I jacked up my back deadlifting many years ago, and my wife and I have always had terrible health insurance. When you're a self-employed freelance writer, that's just the way it is. So I thought, my immediate thought was, ow. And then my second thought was, well, that felt expensive. And really, I know that in Western medicine, there's kind of two paths to this kind of thing. And one is hardcore painkillers, and then the second one is surgery. And didn't really fancy going too far down either road, given the misadventures of some of my co-authors in that front. So really, I just started Googling, ways to fix lower back non-medication, and somehow came across Kelly Starrett's videos. And there's still a massive library of these on YouTube, by the way, spanning back 10 to 12 years or more. And so I managed to fix myself and really found that the cause of the issue was super tight glutes and super tight hips. And then from there, just started doing what Kelly suggests, with really doing 10 minutes of mobility a day every day, and was able to fix myself without having to go for an MRI, let alone get back surgery. So I pitched my editor, Joe Carberry, who people will also know from The Inertia, who's currently the senior editor there. And at the time was editor of both Canoe and Kayak Online and Sup the Mag. And I've been writing for him for about a year and a half, and just told him a little bit about my experience, and was like, hey, I've never met this guy, but without knowing it, he kind of remotely healed my back. And so could I do a Q&A with him? And he said, sure. I'd really love for him to do a video as well, as I don't think a lot of readers will even know what mobility is. They'll think it has something to do with mobile phones or something, or tablets. And so yeah, maybe do it and ask him if he'd do a video. And so we ended up doing a 2-part article for Sup the Mag, and then Kelly kindly did a video exclusive for the readers. And then we just stayed in touch. And at that time, he was writing a book with TJ Murphy, the great triathlon and running author, who's worked for many of the top magazines, and is currently working for Tom Brady's company, actually, his good friend. And Kelly said, how about we do a paddling, surfing, and rowing version of this book, Ready to Run, I'm doing with TJ? And I said, okay, tell me more. So really what he shared with me, that a lot of people don't know about Kelly, that his origin story was not, he didn't just go to PT school for no reason, become a physio just for a laugh, or because he thought he could make money. But he actually was on the whitewater national team for slalom canoe here in Colorado many years ago. And one day he was pouring some espresso on a friend's machine, and his hand kind of pumped out, which as water people, we know can happen sometimes. And when you get a little nervy tingling and you kind of lose power in a hand or both hands. And eventually the symptoms progressed to where he couldn't really feel anything from the base of his trap here all the way down this arm on the right side. And he went to the head coach and was really concerned, obviously, as one would be as a 21, 22-year-old that's hoping to get a spot for the next World Championships. And coach said, that's just what happens. Name a girl on the team that hasn't had at least one shoulder surgery. Now, Nick, try to name a guy that hasn't. Most of your fellow paddlers on the team have. Just go get surgery. Your spot will be here when you get back. And Kelly was like, okay. But then when he got home, he thought, wait a second, what do you mean it's just what happens? Like, sure, we're paddling 300 plus days a year, often twice a day, maybe sometimes even 3 times a day. So I get it, we're doing a lot of volume, but the human body should be more resilient. And also, what am I doing from a form or a technique perspective that's putting me in jeopardy to this degree that now I'm freaking numb, like halfway down this side of my body? So he set out to fix himself, and did manage to do so without getting that surgery. And then really that just became his life's mission of, okay, well, now I fixed myself. So I wonder if there's a way I could fix other watermen and women, and then eventually as many other athletes and regular folks as I can. And so he went to Samuel Merritt PT school, got his DPT eventually, and founded what was Mobility WOD, and has now been rebranded as the Ready State. And so really that story was kind of forms the introduction to our book together.
I vividly remember Mobility Workout of the Day, WOD as you call it. That was really, really popular.
Yeah, absolutely. So it kind of, Kelly was the movement and mobility expert for CrossFit for about 10 to 12 years. And so luckily his book, Becoming a Supple Leopard, came out when CrossFit was going for a niche thing. I think his gym was number 17 or 18 in the world in terms of being the earliest, being number 1. And within a couple of years, as we know, CrossFit really crested a wave and went to over 10,000 boxes, as they call them, aka gyms for non-CrossFit folks. And so, yeah, that book, Becoming a Supple Leopard, is basically the Bible for movement quality and mobility.
So let's talk today mostly about injuries. In your view, what percentage of rowing injuries are preventable?
Well, I think that's a great question. I think to extrapolate it further, Kelly believes that up to 98% of all injuries across sport are preventable. Now,
Wow.
if you are a rugby player, an American football player, say any of the power sports, and you have 300-pound guys crunching your knee, that is an acute injury, and most of us would buckle and be on the surgeon's table the following Monday. So that's an example of an injury that is not really preventable. But a lot of others, even repetitive strain injuries, are either preventable or at least we can mitigate the severity and delay the onset of these. So of course, if you're doing a certain number of what Kelly calls duty cycles, i.e. repetition, and you're locked in a fixed pattern, or in this case, maybe in a fixed or semi-fixed seat, then there is going to be repetitive strain. But in the book, we talk about how we really explore some of the fundamental human movement archetypes, which is a fancy way of saying positions that as humans we should all be able to achieve and sustain full range of motion and motor control in. So we talk about at the hips, the hip hinge and the squat. At the shoulder, we talk about the hang archetype, which would be if you were, say, carrying a weight during a weighted carry. We talk about the overhead shape. And then we talk about a horizontal push and pull. Now, obviously, with rowing, what we're doing is we're generating power from the feet up, from the lower body. We're transmitting that through the core. And then we are applying a horizontal pull. And if you were just stuck doing that motor pattern, like Kelly, similar to what he was doing, although there was a bit more rotation involved in whitewater slalom, and you do that thousands of times a day, 7 days a week for years, there are going to be consequences. But a real way to offset some of those consequences is we know now that a lot of rowers, like our mutual friend Erin Cafaro, is really big into a horizontal push movement. So that could be at its base level push-ups. It could be, say, a dumbbell or barbell bench press. It could be a kettlebell floor press. It could even be a TRX dip or a ring dip. So you can start to train the antagonist movement, so basically the opposite movement in the same direction. And that's certainly a way to start mitigating injuries. And then beyond this, really, we just feel like you need to be doing 10 minutes of basic soft tissue maintenance, aka mobility work on yourself per day, every day. And you can do that in one of two ways. You can go with what hurts, or what the major muscle groups you've just worked in a training session or a race, or just over the course of a week or even a month, you can start at your neck and work through the mobilizations that we have in our book, Waterman 2.0, and end at your feet, and then work your way back up, literally just picking, say, one upper body and one lower body part or muscle group or joint per day, and spending, say, 2 to 3 minutes per side on that. So again, we're not talking about this taking over your life, but really just feel that, and Kelly has worked with the Stanford rowing team. His wife, Juliet, was a elite NCAA Division I rower. I think went to the World Championships, which is actually where they met down in South America one year. And so he's had a little bit of practice with this and has worked with the likes of Erin Cafaro and my good friend Sarah Hendershot, who I know you know also, and Joe DeLeo and others in men's and women's rowing. So we've seen these aren't just theories. Kelly came from a Waterman background. His wife is a former elite rower, and he has advised or consulted with many Olympic and world champions, both on the individual side and the team side. So really, it's just what we're seeing. So I guess one is groove other motor patterns other than just the hip hinge into a horizontal pull. And number two is perform daily mobility maintenance on yourself 10 minutes a day, every day. And if you do that, it's not to say you'll never get hurt, but you're really going to reduce your chances and you're going to become a more durable human as well.
I certainly like the concept of durability, particularly as we age, speaking mainly for myself, but I guess everyone's aging. But if you have been performing an active sport almost continuously through your 20s and 30s, certainly it becomes harder to maintain your peak as you move into your 40s and 50s. And the downward slide is more pronounced compared with people who haven't exercised that hard and have maybe come to, regular sport later on after their teen years. It's definitely a noticeable difference from my point of view.
Absolutely. And I think my colleague and co-author, Andy Galpin, who is a muscle physiologist of all things at Cal State Fullerton, which basically means he performs muscle biopsies by day as well as his teaching load, and then tries to apply what they're learning. So everything from, the current 110-meter men's world record holder on the track, who has the highest percentage of ultra fast twitch muscle fibers of any athlete ever tested, all the way down to an athlete that would be more slow twitch predominant, and everyone in between. And then really Andy with his, you can check out some of his work, his 5-minute physiology videos on YouTube, really breaking that down into applicable basic principles for the rest of us. And what he says is exactly what you were just saying, Rebecca, that inevitably there is some muscle loss as we age, and this begins way earlier than most of us would like. But really training the fast twitch muscle fibers and doing that twice a week for 5 to 10 minutes, whether it's with jumping rope, whether it's from doing some box jumps, or if you've warmed up properly, even some short sprints, or on the rowing machine, you could just do some sprint intervals. And doing this at the beginning of your workout, always doing your fastest and most powerful work first, directly after your warm up, before you get into any of the more elongated pieces on the rower or more endurance work in the gym. And if you literally just spend 5 to 10 minutes twice a week, Andy and his colleagues at Cal State Fullerton have found that, from muscle biopsy evidence up to longer term studies that look at other factors, that you can kind of delay the onset of that fast twitch muscle fiber, which as we age starts to become problematic, and really is a key reason when old people fall that they can't get off the floor. So if you combine, say, the Turkish get up protocol, which my friends at Strong First teach so well, with a light kettlebell, and you do, like I said, these 2 5 to 10 minute sessions of very high intensity, very fast, very short duration sets in your training twice a week, then you can start to offset some of that age-related muscle decline, and really more essentially the decline of the super fast twitch muscle fibers.
So let's talk a bit more broadly for anyone who's listening. What sort of lifestyle changes do you recommend which can both improve performance and recovery, and of course injury get prevented?
Yeah, I think in learning from people like Alison Brager, Matthew Walker, and Chris Winter, who are 3 sleep experts that I know, that the research shows us that sleep is the biggest win. And I know people have heard, an awful lot about sleep hygiene routines, and there's kind of some performance guilt around this, and sleep tracking scores and this kind of thing. But really, starting to do some things like cutting out caffeine at least 6 hours before bedtime, because we know that that's the minimum half-life of caffeine, even for fast metabolizers. Limiting yourself to no more than 2 alcoholic beverages per evening. And again, you don't have to become, this monastic type, even though monks do drink and brew beer, I believe, particularly in Belgium, countries like that. But so those 2 things, which will kind of help slow down what Kelly calls the stimulant sedative cycle. And then from there, making sure you're sleeping in a cold, dark room, preferably blackout curtains, earplugs, this kind of thing, and trying as much as your schedule will allow to get a consistent sleep time and wake time, which are consistent with your own chronobiology, which is a fancy way of saying some of us are night owls, some of us are early birds. And you, as much as our society seems to place a value on early risers, if you look at the work of Dr. Michael Bruce, what he says is that doesn't fit everyone. And in fact, if you try to go against that chronobiology, you can damage your heart, you can cause problems on your cellular level up. And so really just trying to find your ideal groove. If you know you're a morning person, great, be a morning person. If not, try to adjust your schedule more. So like me, you're doing admin, interviews, chasing invoices in the morning, you're doing your real productive work in the afternoon. But again, the key being that you're winding down at night, getting rid of those screens at least 2 hours before bed. And really the sleep, I think it was Matthew Walker that had an Instagram or Twitter post a while ago that was like, what if there was a performance enhancing drug that was legal and allowed you to, increase the accuracy of your fine motor skills by 60%, and then, increase your cognitive concentration for this long, and this massive list of benefits. It was like, there is, and we can sum it up in one word, and it isn't steroids or HGH, it's sleep. So it seems like, these kind of podcasts, people always harp on this type of thing. But the reason we do is that we know that a lot of people are chronically sleep deprived, and an awful lot more still don't have enough sleep. And that will put a ding in your recovery. It will limit your physical performance, both from a speed, strength, and power and an endurance standpoint. And it will reduce your focus, your attention, your ability to get into and sustain a flow state. So really, if you just start making some small lifestyle tweaks, like I just mentioned, and game your sleep, then you're going to derive more bang for your buck benefits than if you do anything else I'm going to recommend on this podcast or otherwise.
That is fantastic advice. Now let's take a little look at the book that we're here to talk about. So here it is. It's an image from Amazon. You can buy it right across the web. It's called Waterman 2.0, Optimized Movement for Lifelong Pain-Free Paddling and Surfing. And of course, we can include rowing inside that. Now, Kelly, of course, is the lead author, the famous athlete, and you're the man who actually did the writing with him, Phil. You very kindly gave me a preview copy, and I want to show for people who are watching on YouTube, and for listeners, you'll just have to trust me on this. Chapter 2 is here. It's called Mobility 101. Talk us through what it is that this chapter really emphasizes as a beginning primer for the new reader.
Sure. So really what we're breaking down here is what the heck mobility means. And again, not in terms of technology, where it would mean mobile technology, but so really, a definition of mobility could be that it's the ability to assume fundamental human positions, like we mentioned earlier, a hinge, a squat, a lunge, an overhead push and pull, and a horizontal push and pull being some of the basic ones, with a full range of motion, and to not only get into those positions, but to sustain them under load. So by that we mean with weight, with the added demands of speed and power, such as you would find when you're on the rowing machine or on the water. And so really that's kind of a basic definition of mobility. And then from there we go into, again, as I mentioned earlier, the need to understand yourself. So we call this know thyself. So it's really just saying that the goal of this book is to help you understand what you should be able to do, not just as a rower or a paddler or a surfer, but as a fully functional human. And if you can't do those things, how to perform some basic maintenance on yourself. And then from there, really just talking about mobility often becomes a thing where we distill it down into foam rolling, which that's one kind of soft tissue work, but there are many others. Or it becomes a thing that we only go to when, man, my back hurts, or man, that hip's acting up again. So we roll around on a lacrosse ball, say, or a roller for 5 minutes, feel quite a bit better, and just go back to not doing any mobility until the next time those trouble spots hurt. So really what we're advocating is a daily approach, again, where you just follow the advice and the exercises we give in the book, or even on Kelly's YouTube channel, for no more than 10 minutes a day, unless you have more time. And you can fit that in while you're watching a Netflix film with your significant other, while you're playing a board game with your kids. So I think that really it's not a question of creating new space for this. Just do something else that involves being on the floor, or even, say, putting a lacrosse ball under your hamstring and moving around a little bit while you're eating dinner with your family or friends, and doing that 10 minutes a day every single day, which to us is that's what a daily practice of any kind looks like, is something that you prioritize and you do daily, whether that's you're a spiritual person, so it's prayer and study of your sacred text, or it's taking a daily walk, or if you're a martial artist on the side, and or indeed a rower, then you might be doing that daily. So really making mobility a priority. And again, just prioritizing it 10 minutes a day. And from that, you're going to see a massive performance boost. You're going to see a decrease in injury risk, and you're going to see better recovery and hopefully less pain.
So for listeners and viewers, the link to find that book is on Amazon. The quick link is amzn.to. So that's short for amazon.to/366HTYR. And you can get all the details. And there's also a really good look inside for the book on Amazon that shows you the full chapters and what's covered in each chapter. So I do recommend that you go and have a look at it. Moving forward, what do you think now, Phil, is the number one practice outside of this daily mobility work that you'd recommend as a daily thing for people to do?
I think taking a daily walk is massively underrated, and not just when we're all kind of restricted by COVID, so we can't go to the gym, we can't go to the boathouse, whatever it might be. So there's plenty of dedicated books to this on this subject, and it's something that my friend Aaron Alexander and I explore in our book Align, the Align method. And really there's an awful lot of research to show, both if you look at the Japanese researchers that are looking into what they call Shinrin Yoku, which the rest of us call forest bathing now. So I have a piece up on its website. So if you just go to onit.com and search forest bathing, that should pop up. And one of the most startling benefits there was that after a long walk in the woods, basically, as Bill Bryson might say, his great book, Walk in the Woods, the levels of NK cells, natural killer cells, which take out cancer, amongst other things, remained elevated in this study's participants for up to 30 days. So again, from a cellular level up, taking a walk is about the best thing that you can do for your health. And even beyond this, just we talked about sleep-wake cycles earlier. So going outside, if possible, without your sunglasses. Now, I know some people are going to get all woke on me about that, but whatever. Your body craves natural sunlight. It's almost like an extra essential vitamin or mineral. And we know that it helps regulate vitamin D production in a way that no supplement can. The more skin you can expose in a tasteful way, of course, and of course not in the heat of the day, but getting at least 20 minutes of sun exposure in a natural setting with no sunglasses and say your shirt sleeves rolled up and in a pair of shorts, that is going to, like the sleep thing, it sounds like a small thing, but it's actually going to yield a lot of physical, emotional, cognitive, and as I mentioned with the NK cell elevation from forest bathing, even cellular level / immunity benefits.
And that's something, of course, you could just do at your lunch hour, or you could get off the bus on the way to work one stop earlier and just walk the last, couple of kilometers to your office and get your daily dose.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Now, injury is something that happens to most of us at some point in time. I vividly remember my first injury, and the only advice I got from my coach at the time was go and get treated soon and early. And I would back that up from my own experience. Do not go to a general practitioner doctor, go to a sports injury specialist, preferably one who already treats people who do your sport, because having them understand the common causes and the movement patterns that are normal for your sport really assists them in giving you first an accurate diagnosis and secondly, moving you on to the right sort of treatment. But injury prevention is better than cure, isn't it? So what exercises do you recommend people could be doing to prevent themselves getting injured?
Yeah, and with a caveat, as you mentioned, every single one of us, me included, you included, everyone listening or watching has been injured and probably will be injured again at some point. So we can't completely rule out the risk of injury. So that caveat aside, I also write for Strong First. So Pavel was the gentleman who popularized kettlebell training in the West, brought it over from, he's actually from the Ukraine, but from Russia. And there's a reason they call that company Strong First, because if you look at 2 of the 4 main exercises that predict your vitality and resilience in older age, 1 is leg strength and 2 is grip strength. And so I think really finding a minimum effective dose protocol, which in Pavel's case, I would advise getting his book, Simple and Sinister, second edition or revised edition, and then getting the weight of kettlebell that he recommends in there, or possibly 2 kettlebells, and starting slowly. And if you literally just did the kettlebell swing, start with a kettlebell deadlift, move up to a 2-handed swing, and if you eventually feel comfortable enough to try it, try a 1-handed kettlebell swing, and then you also do a Turkish get up, which is another great kettlebell exercise. You have 1 fast kettlebell exercise paired with 1 slow one. And in the book, Pavel says repeat until strong, which is great, although a little nebulous for some. So I would say if you even did that, say 10 to 15 minutes of kettlebell training, again, with a warm up and cool down either side. And again, because that's an explosive exercise, the kettlebell swing, do that first, then do your get ups. And if you're going to do anything else, do those after. But if you literally just did that 2 to 3 times a week for 10 to 20 minutes a time, and then followed it with some mobility exercises, you are going to be strong enough to handle everything you're going to be thrown at in the water in terms of the power, speed, endurance demands of your sport, and just the forces acting on your body. As well as if your buddy asks 3 friends to move, you're going to be either number 1, 2, or 3 on that list of people he or she is going to call, because they're going to know that you're strong and capable. And again, we're literally talking a minimum effective dose. And this is what my friends and I call a dad workout. So my friend Matt, shout out to my buddy Matt Feeney, has more kids than I do. He has double the number of kids. He has 4 instead of 2. And he wrote to me recently saying, we used to deadlift heavy together and do all these crazy things. He now lives in Wisconsin. I live in Colorado, so we unfortunately can't train together. But he said, man, I'm so busy with work and with the family. What can I do? And I was like, buy Simple and Sinister, the extended or revised edition. Buy the weighted kettlebell Pavel recommends. And right now it's kind of hard to find kettlebells new. Everywhere's sold out. So go to Craigslist or whatever your local kind of resale website is or store, find a used kettlebell and use it, or find a buddy that isn't using his or hers, get theirs, borrow it for a while, and just do what the book says, really. And I said, Matt, that's about the best dad workout or mom workout or anyone workout that you can do if we're talking pure minimum effective dose. Because really, you can do all the mobility work in the world. You can stretch, in quotes, even though we don't like that term. You can foam roll to your heart's content. But if your body is not strong enough to handle the forces that getting in the boat or getting on the erg is going to place on it, that's all going to be for nothing. You've got to be strong first, and then also mobile second.
Yeah, I totally support the strength first thing, because I teach beginners, and you can totally see how people who are new to the sport don't have the right strength for this sport. It doesn't mean that they're not strong. And that is definitely a really great thing to teach. And one of the things I teach is how to get into the boat. And you need to be able to take a sideways step and then lower yourself with your weight on one or both feet to a seated position. And that's a long way down for most people who are only used to ever sitting down and standing up off a chair rather than the floor.
Yeah, for sure. And not to just plug my friends' work, because these are all experts in their field, but our mutual friend Joseph DeLeo in Kansas City also works with Strong First and has some great programs specifically for rowers that are built around the kettlebell and done in a way that it's sustainable volume-wise, where you're not going to get in the boat feeling woefully sore. But he consults, with the Portuguese national team and many college teams here in the States. So if you're looking for somebody who is a rower, who knows their rowing, but also knows their strength training and can kind of give you a rower's take on Strong First principles, then check out Joe DeLeo. Just Google him and you'll find him, and see some of the work that he's done, because it's really quite profound in its impact and quite simple to begin.
Joe is also a podcaster on the Rowing Chat Network. Look for Strength Coach Roundtable, which is the 3-way podcast that he does. Now, we're all mentioned injuries so often, but we do get injured. The classic advice when you get injured is to ice it, take some anti-inflammatories, ibuprofen or something like that, and maybe that's the first thing you should do. Do you agree with that?
No, and actually the guy that came up, Kelly does a video interview. You can search for it on his website, thereadystate.com, or on YouTube. He does an interview with the doctor who came up with the RICE, rest, ice, compression, elevation protocol. And that doctor has now recanted his advice on the rest, because you need active rest to promote necessary blood flow for healing to occur. And he has also said that the icing part is a bad idea. And the reason, and the same goes for ibuprofen. And the reason is that both anti-inflammatories and ice blunt your body's danger signal, which in turn blunts the acute phase of recovery. And so it sure feels good, doesn't it? I have turned my ankles more times, and I actually dislocated the right one, and did what Michael Jordan did and retired a second time from basketball. Played college basketball back in the day, so I've sprained my ankles many times, and it sure feels, nothing feels better on a sprained ankle than an ice pack. We know this. Or maybe as a rower, on a bum shoulder or a sore wrist, nothing feels better in the time. But you are going to delay your total return to sport time. You're also going to delay the acute recovery phase, and the same goes with ibuprofen. So as you mentioned, the best thing to do is to find a physio or PT or other injury specialist in your area. And if you have trouble, on Kelly's website, thereadystate.com, there is a directory of certified Mobility WOD coaches. And so just check that out, or just Google the name of your town or city and rowing injuries or something like that, water sports injuries, and you're sure to find somebody. And just take their guided advice to really walk you through it. So active rest, certainly you're going to be compromised in your movement patterns, but you're still going to need to move and move as close to your normal pattern as you would. You don't want to be walking with your foot turned out super far if that's not your natural gait. You don't want to have a hitch in your giddy up, as it says in the Johnny Cash movie, Walk the Line. Reese Witherspoon says that to Johnny. So you don't want to be doing that. And the compression, absolutely. Get a TENS machine, get a Mark Pro, get a Normatec, or get one from your physio to borrow. That absolutely works. The elevation to some degree works, but if the guy that came up with the RICE protocol has admitted and retracted the static rest for active rest and has said the icing does not work, it's not to say it doesn't do anything, because temporarily it does relieve pain. And say if you were at a world championships or an Olympics and you got hurt in the semi-final and you had to row in the final, yes, you should absolutely ice and do whatever it I won't say take a fistful of ibuprofen. That's terrible advice. Take a few ibuprofen, do what you need to do to get on the water, but know in doing so that you're going to damage yourself more. So needs must sometimes if you're at that elite level. But for the most part, yeah, seek the advice of a professional. But if they tell you to be icing it, they're wrong. And if they argue with you, direct them to the guy that invented the protocol and what he now says. And really try to move around as much as possible and get back to your full motor patterns. And also recognize that your balance is affected. So Sue Falzone has a book called Bridging the Gap on this, on return to sport. And the proprioception in any athlete is affected. From an ankle, it makes you feel real unstable the first time you try to run or jump, or, as you said, take that sideways step to get into a kind of lateral lunge or lateral squat to get into the boat. It's going to feel really horrible. It's going to be the same even in your rowing stroke. If you have a shoulder, elbow, wrist, or hand injury, it's going to feel really weird and you're going to feel slightly off balance. So you've got to retrain that system. And a way to do that is to break down the full motor pattern into parts. So you could try like a quarter stroke, a half stroke, a 3/4 stroke into a full stroke at a lower intensity than normal to start regrooving that pattern from a psychomotor standpoint. And then just follow the advice of a good sports physio. But do not be taking a bunch of ibuprofen and do not be icing a bunch. Because like I said, if Gabe Merkin, the guy that invented it, says it's wrong, then it's wrong.
That's excellent advice and very great insight. Thank you so much. So Phil White, Waterman 2.0 is the book. It's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Tell the listeners and where they can connect with you personally if they have any further questions.
Sure. Yeah, you can. My iPhone 5S. My wife and I both have 5Ss, and we shared a phone actually for like 15 years of marriage. When I was 37, was a big boy, I got my own phone, but it died real quick because I'm on the phone with co-authors a bit. So I won't be on Instagram for a little while until probably May 20th, 21st. But after that, I'll quasi-active on Instagram at Phil White Books. So just feel free to follow me. I'll follow you right back. Reach out with a direct message. Love to continue the conversation there. And then my website is in desperate need of updating, but philwhitebooks.com is the website.
Fantastic. Phil, it's been a delight. Thank you so much for opening our eyes to all of these insights for watery people. And the Waterman 2.0 book is there for anyone who'd like to get it. Thanks to you, our listeners. It's, as ever, been really nice. We've had some people live watching alongside us. If you want to watch us live, you just need to follow us on YouTube. If you subscribe, you get an alert when we go live. And if you follow Rowing Chat on Facebook, you can also see us live streaming into that profile. Otherwise, of course, we know that the vast majority listen on any podcast platform. We'd really appreciate it if you would tell your friends. We would like to have more listeners. And of course, the listener survey is another way where you can tell us the sorts of things you'd like us to do in the future. I've been Rebecca Caro, and this is the Rowing Chat podcast interview. Till next time, goodbye.